Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our monthly Financial Source webinar series presented by the Center for Realtor Financial Wellness. I'm Brittany Shanks, NAR's Financial Wellness Manager. Today's webinar topic will focus on crisis as opportunity, making better money decisions now and later. Please note, if you miss any part of this webinar, the recording will be available on Thursday, April 23rd at nar.realtor/CFFW/webinars. If this is your first time joining our webinar series, we want to extend a warm welcome to you. And for our returning members, thank you for your support and joining us again. For our new guests, just to give you a little bit of background about the program, our Financial Source webinar series have been created with you in mind. This is a resource. It's designed to help you understand financial topics on a deeper level. So each month, our subject matter experts will provide you with step-by-step solutions, tips, planning options, and an array of valuable information for your financial journey. So no matter where you are in your career stage of financial planning, we hope that you'll find these webinar sessions helpful and informative. So for more information and details about our upcoming webinars and accessing our recorded webinars, please visit nar.realtor/CFFW/webinars. We hope you can join us for our next session on Wednesday, June 17th at 1 p.m. Central. This Financial Source webinar will focus on Nick Crowder's best-selling book, The Golden Handoff. Get tips on how to handle succession planning and selling your book of business when you're ready. It never hurts to start planning, so register while space is still available and spread the word to colleagues, associates, and friends. So here I would like to provide a small disclaimer. Don't worry, I won't read all of it, but please note that the information and materials provided in the Center for Realtor Financial Wellness webinars and seminars are not intended or provided to be used as a substitute for the advice of your tax, investment, legal, and/or financial advisors, or to be the basis of specific financial planning activities. The opinions and views expressed or shared in these presentations represent only those of the developers, speakers, presenters, or instructors, and have not been endorsed or approved by the National Association of Realtors. So for more information regarding our webinar disclaimer, please refer here on slide 6. Our Financial Source webinar presentations are approximately 1 hour long. So for the first 45 minutes, we'll be focusing on the platform tools as well as the presentation, and then the last 15 minutes will be allocated for answering questions. If you have a question during the webinar, please type it into the box on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and you can also email us at financialwellness@nar.realtor. We will do our best to answer each question at the end as time permits. So now at this time, I'm going to turn things over to Mark Gold, the Senior Vice President of Member Development for the National Association of Realtors, who will introduce our speaker for this webinar session. Mark Gold, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brittany. It's my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Brian Portnoy, who's the founder of Shaping Wealth, a financial wellness consultancy, and the author of 2 best-selling books, The Geometry of Wealth and The Investor's Paradox. As an expert in behavioral finance, Brian has served as a keynote speaker, seminar leader, and coach to thousands of investors on topics ranging from portfolio strategy to the nexus of money and happiness. Brian has held senior investment and education roles throughout the hedge fund and mutual fund industries. Brian earned his undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and earned his doctorate at the University of Chicago. Brian also earned the coveted Chartered Financial Analyst credential from the Association for Investment Management Research. As Brittany mentioned, there will be a chance for Q&A at the end. And at this point, I think we should just turn it over to you, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us, and we're really looking forward to this presentation.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Brittany. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with all of you today. As we can see here, the title of my talk is Crisis as Opportunity, Making Better Money Decisions now and later. I think we're all pretty overwhelmed by the current situation because it's just not a financial crisis, obviously. It's much more so a global health crisis. And so I hope everyone is safe and in good shape. But unfortunately, money and all of its different dimensions are difficult to avoid even during times like this. So what I want to do today is focus on how we can see this crisis, and we of course don't know how it's exactly going to play out, but how can we actually see it as a financial opportunity? So the talk today is going to have 3 sections. The first is going to deal with our brains and how our brains are wired or not to make money decisions. The second section will be more practical advice. We'll get in the weeds on some personal finance topics, and then we will wrap up with the big picture. I'll step back and talk about how this is actually very much an opportunity to think about our values and even our identity and how that intersects with money life. So we're going to take a bit of a step back, about 130,000 years back. And that was about the time that the brains that Homo sapiens had in their heads then are about the same as the ones that we have today. Evolution is a very long and slow process. So the brains that we developed to deal with that environment are more or less the brains that we're working with today. And that has created, a heck of a disconnect, because the name of the game thousands of years ago was survival. Those were much more dangerous times. And it was during, those previous eras and eons that we developed a fight or flight instinct. That fight or flight instinct is not particularly well calibrated to dealing with choosing the right mutual fund or figuring out whether you should buy or sell oil. As yesterday's crazy markets showed, oil fell into negative territory for the first time ever. Very strange, unprecedented event. The point is that those old school fight or flight instincts don't map up very well to new school capital markets and stock markets, and that creates both opportunity as well as a few dilemmas. So our brain on money has a number of different features to it. There's a field that I operate in called behavioral finance, which is the intersection of psychology and economics. And we can look somewhat rigorously at the way that we're supposed to make better or worse money decisions. What I'll say to start is that, and I say this a lot, simple does not mean easy in the world of money. I could give you lots of pretty straightforward advice that you would say, oh yeah, that makes great sense, but actually following through on the advice would be very difficult. What would some of those pieces of advice be? Spend less than you earn, save over time, invest for the long run, buy low, sell high in the market. Our brain is actually wired to do the opposite of all of those instructions that I just offered, in part because our brains developed to deal with very dangerous environments and not the world that we have in front of us right now. So I want to stress that my least favorite word in all of finance is irrational. What you'll see economists and other money types do a lot is talk about the fact, well, we're making not just bad decisions with regard to not saving enough or spending too much or those sorts of things, is that we're being irrational. And I'll share with everybody that that's actually not true. What we are is normal for the evolutionary reasons that I just articulated. We've developed many shortcuts for good reason, but when we map those up to money decisions regarding investing, saving, spending, and so forth, we can get into a little bit of trouble. So let me just point out 2 broad areas of insight in this world of investor psychology. One regarding information, and the second regarding how we take risk. On the information front, we are now dealing with more information, more choice, more data than at any point before in recorded human history. We know we live in the digital age. We know we live in the information age. And we've never, as human beings, had to process this much information. And in fact, it's not clear that our brains are wired to process this information, all of this information, which is why we have true conditions called things like decision fatigue and choice overload. The brain is a muscle, and muscles get tired. And from the moment we wake up and look at our phones to the moment we put our heads on the pillow, having just looked at our phones and everything in between, that's just not mentally taxing. It's also physically exhausting. There's many different informational biases that impact us. I'll flag 3 that should hit home with everybody, and those are availability, recency, and confirmation. Availability bias basically says that you notice the things that are in front of you, and you don't notice the things that aren't. And you also don't go find the things that aren't in front of you. So the people you talk to, the stations that you watch, the websites or social media that you surf, that's what's in front of you, and you tend not to go far and wide looking for a variety of other sources of information. Recency bias is the notion that we tend to pay attention to what we saw last. So we don't have great memories, and whatever's right in front of us and what we saw a few minutes ago, that's front of mind. And then finally, there's confirmation bias. This notion that we actually find information that reinforces our existing beliefs. And together, those different biases lead us to have not great information and not very balanced information. Let's move on to how we think about and manage risk. And before I do, just to bridge that, I want to share a quote from Richard Thaler, who's a University of Chicago economist and one of the first Nobel Prize winners in the field of behavioral finance. And his quippy observation about behavioral finance is, quote, "People aren't dumb, the world is hard." And I want folks to remember that, because I know for a fact this is true of me, friends, family, but also folks that I coach and consult with. We tend to give ourselves a very hard time about maybe not saving as much as we should and maybe spending too much. But this is really hard. It's genuinely very difficult to get this right all of the time. In terms of how we manage risk, I already alluded a few moments ago to the fight versus flight response that we have in more dangerous times where survival is front of mind. When we translate that into especially how we navigate the stock market during such crazy times, is we go through this cycle of greed and fear, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. When the market goes up, it feels good. It's like, okay, we're making some money, and we tend to buy more when the market goes up. Well, when the market goes down, like we've seen lately, we get fearful. We feel threatened, and as a result, we run, we sprint, we flee, we sell some of or all of our portfolio. Well, remember that investing 101 is buy low and sell high. But what we do a lot of the time, because of just who we are as normal human beings, is that we buy high and we sell low. Just a couple quick slides to give some evidence for this. This looks at the 2008 crisis, when, as many of you recall, the markets plummeted based on a variety of terrible news regarding the housing market and other factors. Leading up to 2008, people were buying stocks hand over fist. Those were pretty good times, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07. Well, things got wobbly in 08 and were also quite bad at the beginning of 09. And people sold. People sold a lot or all of their portfolios, but the market came racing back starting in 2009. And but a lot of folks were on the sidelines. A lot of folks did not capture the rally up. And so the average mutual fund investor didn't start investing again until 2014, and they missed nearly 5 years of a great bull market. Well, we can see this dynamic happening again. This is a very quick market snapshot from the last 6 weeks or so, ending last week. And we know that the market crashed in March. It went down roughly 30% or so when it came snapping back up. There's no question that when we have the data available, what we're going to see is that a lot of people sold at the bottom, and then they did not, and they weren't back in to capture the rally, because right now the market is down, but not nearly as much as it was. One of the features, key critical features of our disposition toward taking risk is something called loss aversion. This is the idea that losses are more painful than gains are pleasurable. Psychologists set the ratio at about 2 to 1, meaning that a $100 loss feels twice as bad as a $100 gain feels good. So as some people put it, bad is stronger than good. You know, for anybody who's ever been to a casino and bet some money, if you make money, you might feel good, but if you lose money, you feel pretty awful. And that disproportionate response is what loss aversion is all about, and that impacts the way that we take risk. It means that during volatile times, we tend to run away from our portfolios. We tend not to stick with our plans. And as a result, in the long run, we put ourselves in a worse situation that we need to be in. This is a feeling we all have, not just in finance, but in sports and business and so forth. Little quote here from Agassi from his biography. And he wrote that a win doesn't feel as good as a loss feels bad. And the good feeling doesn't last as long as the bad, not even close. So that's loss aversion in action. So just to recap the first section, your brain is wired to make lousy financial decisions, but there are still many concrete things we can do now, here during the midst of this crisis, but also later in terms of long-term planning to fix problems and grab opportunities. So I'm going to now kind of dive a little bit into the weeds on some personal finance topics. First thing I want to do is define our main term here, which is financial wellness. I know that NAR has built out a fantastic financial wellness program that all of you have the privilege of tapping into. And as I see it, in terms of my own practice, financial wellness has 4 different dimensions, and I've got them set out here. The first couple I call playing defense, and the second is more playing offense. So just starting from the top, you know, there's just the notion of getting by, being able to control your day-to-day or your month-to-month finances, paying the bills on time, not having too much debt. The second level is that ability to protect yourself during times of emergency, very much front of mind for nearly all of us right now. So the ability to deal with financial emergencies or unexpected pitfalls. You have some insurance, you might have a network of friends and family that you can tap into to help during these sorts of periods. The next couple, playing offense, it's more about kind of long-term planning and achieving goals. Here we have, you know, achieving goals, having clear goals for your future, and being on track to meet them. And what are the standard goals? Well, retirement is obviously the very big one, but, you know, purchasing a new home, paying for college for your kids or for yourself, those are some of the big ticket items. And finally, what I would consider the deepest sense of financial wellness is what I call funded contentment. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But this is, you know, making your choices in life, having the freedom or flexibility to pursue a life that's worth living. So just by way of kind of setting the table in terms of what we mean by financial wellness, it's not just one thing. There are different dimensions to it. Well, how do we achieve financial wellness? How do we get to that level of funded contentment? The way I think about it is that there's 3 basic steps. We want to define our purpose. What's really meaningful to us in life? What are we trying to accomplish? What are our values? Second step is that we set priorities. We think about the risks that can come our way. We put plans in motion. And then finally, we make decisions across many different dimensions of money life. And easy to look at this and say, well, that's pretty straightforward. Why am I doing something? What's my game plan for doing it? And then how do I specifically execute? And yes, quite simple. But if there's a theme that should emerge from today, is that simple does not mean easy in the world of money and finance. So now we're going to begin to get a little bit more granular. To me, there are 7 dimensions to what I call money life: earning, saving, spending, investing, borrowing, managing risk, which would include insuring, and then giving. Each of these is not only a distinct type of action or form of activity, also from kind of a psychological and an emotional point of view. Each of these has, a lot of little different dimensions that we can explore. We're not going to dive too deep on the emotional dimensions to all of these, but they are there and they're worth thinking about. I'll flag a couple just to plant a few seeds. Giving. Just go to the bottom right. One of the great sources of meaning and happiness in life is our ability to help others. And so when we give to our neighbors, when we go online and contribute to a GoFundMe, that not only helps the recipient, it helps us. It makes us feel connected to groups. It makes us feel connected to others. Another emotionally charged money domain is earning. Think about the phrase that we use when we talk about having a job. It's called making a living. Okay, that operates on a few different levels, not just in terms of the paycheck that comes every now and then, but in terms of having your life mean something to you through the vocation or the job that you have. So money life has a lot of different dimensions. What can we do in the here and now? These are really tough times. I saw a survey just yesterday that 88% of people who were surveyed are having their finances challenged during this time right now, during the time of COVID. And everybody I know is having to think in some detail, and it's rarely fun to think in some detail about their budgets, their emergency funds and such. The next 3 slides are going to have a lot of detail on them. We can come back during Q&A if you'd like on any particular topic, but let me just kind of walk through each of these and things that you might do to improve your current situation, but also, to the larger theme, take this crisis and use it as an opportunity for better long-term planning. First thing I flagged was giving to others. I just mentioned on the previous slide that giving and helping is part of who we are. And so there is no doubt folks less fortunate than each of us that we can be reaching out to in a variety of different ways. And though sometimes it's hard to think about others when we ourselves are struggling, the instinct to give is real, and it feels good, and it does good. Then there's the emergency fund. I'm sure this is something that each of you has thought about, and there's different ways to conceptualize what an emergency fund is all about, but I'm just going to take the straightforward path and say that it's really smart, if at all possible, to have 1 to 3 months of our monthly expenses in the bank, in cash, not taking any sort of market risk, not stocks and not even bonds for that matter, just in a cash account, which means it's probably not earning a lot, but still having that cash so that we don't feel like during an emergency we have to urgently and immediately make very difficult decisions. The thing is, during crises, time compresses. All right, the future becomes very, very fuzzy, and the present becomes very, very vivid. This is kind of an insight from some elements of neuroscience. I've been in some car accidents. I'm sure many of you have as well. And it's sort of strange how our memories of those accidents, it feels like everything's slowed down. It feels like our mind is taking 100 or 1,000 more snapshots a millisecond of everything that's going on. That's actually happening. In times of crisis, we get so focused on the here and now, and it's impossible to focus on the long term. Having an emergency fund allows us to focus on the medium to long term. Well, how do we go about doing that? Well, a big issue is like just figure out where your money goes. I mean, I can tell you that for myself and my wife, and I've got 3 teenage kids, figuring out the credit cards, the debit cards, the bank accounts, and so forth, the Venmos, the other sorts of cash transfer apps. It's actually quite a pain to figure out what you've spent and where. And so putting into plan a process where you can review your credit card and debit statements, it's really really important. Not fun, but if we think about kind of having a spring cleaning mindset, this is a good time to go through and ask where does my money go? And thinking about, okay, are there areas where I can spend less or not at all? And so setting a budget and really in 2 forms. One, what I call the lockdown budget, things that you need, and it's basically just the essentials, and then a normal version for kind of regular day-to-day life. I know NAR provides lots of different resources, and when Mark and or Brittany chime in at the end, I'm sure they can flag different things that are available to you through this portal. But there are plenty of software packages and apps that are pretty good, like Quicken, Mint, and a very good one called You Need a Budget. Shopping for savings rates online is now a thing. There are online banks that are real, federally insured banks that offer savings rates considerably more than your corner bank. Not a bad thing to go see what's available. And to the extent that your emergency fund can make 1% interest versus 0.1% interest over time, that actually adds up to something real. Then there's the other side of the balance sheet, your debt. What do you owe? This is the really not fun part, but having an accurate balance sheet is absolutely critical to having a stable financial life. So, figuring out what you own versus what you owe, one piece of paper, forget terms like assets and liabilities. Get it out a legal pad, draw a line down the middle, on the left, right own, on the right owe, and it should take an hour or 2 to really figure out, doesn't need to be to the penny, but a relatively accurate snapshot of how financially fragile you are based on the balance between what you own and what you owe. And if you have debt that's sitting in very high credit card or other vehicles, are there opportunities that you can find online and elsewhere where you can roll into lower interest rate type vehicles? And then finally, just having a sense of what your credit reports say about you, which is so annualcreditreport.com can give you some good insight into your TransUnion and Equifax credit reports. I'm going to move on. There's only one message on this slide, but there's a few different ways to execute. And the message here is it says, negotiate everything. This is a time to use your voice, to use your megaphone, and negotiate every fixed cost in your budget, as we just discussed. Go through every regular bill, and when appropriate, call those companies to ask for some sort of relief. Could be your rent or your mortgage. Landlords and banks understand what's going on. They themselves are strapped, and there's actually a lot of goodwill out there. So hopefully you'll be a recipient of some of that goodwill. With your credit cards, is there anything that you can do by calling them up and asking for lower interest rates or suspending late charges or things like that? Student loans, there's already been some relief mandated from the federal level. That's another area for negotiation. And then, your automobile, your car insurance, and your car payments. Who can you call to say, hey, can we put these payments on pause for a month or 2 or 3? And I think what we're finding, to the whole society's credit, across all of these domains, there's a lot of people who are willing to show a lot of forbearance. The last topic here, before moving on, in terms of like in the weeds financial planning, is the investing piece. This is where I actually spend a lot of my time. as a consultant, as a coach. We're not going to go into a lot of details here. If I can leave you with just one idea as it relates to this topic, is to appreciate the difference between investing and speculating. Investing is basically allocating your assets into stocks and bonds and other investments within the context of a plan. And we're going to bridge into talking about a plan in a slide or two. So if you're making decisions in the context of a plan, that's probably investing. If you're just looking at the market, you're watching CNBC, you're looking at websites and such, and you say, oh, man, oil's way down, maybe I should try to buy the dip. Or that company's not going to make it, maybe I should short the stock. That's not investing, that's gambling. And maybe that's fine. Maybe you have a little bit of money set aside for gambling or speculating, but we have to convince ourselves that there's a difference between the two. And when we're investing, there's three reasons we do that. We want to grow our capital over time, we want to generate income to meet near-term liabilities, and we want to protect ourselves against big market drawdowns. So as it relates to panic selling and panic buying, try to step back. Don't do anything urgent or immediate. Don't try to buy the dip. Don't try to sell the dip. Finally, I'll say that simplicity rules. This is something that's taken me 20, 25 years to learn, but at the end of the day, a portfolio made up of broadly diversified stock index funds and bond index funds, plus some cash, plus maybe some real estate. That's all we need. And when arranged in an appropriate balance, especially as it's targeted toward long-term retirement goals, that's a really good thing. And picking individual stocks tends to fit into the speculating bucket, not into the investing bucket. Keep in mind that there are thousands of hedge funds as well as thousands of computers that are trading every individual stock 24/7. And so for you to go into the market and say, hey, I've got an edge in this particular stock, there's a pretty good chance that you don't, and that you can easily get burned. Given what's happening in the debt market, there's a lot of funds and bonds that appear to be much higher yield than they used to be. Higher yield means higher interest rates, and that sounds good. A 6% bond versus a 3% bond, I could get twice the income. Well, it's 6% for a reason compared to 3%. Higher yield means higher risk. It might be the case that the risk is worth taking, but please appreciate that there's no free lunch and that there are some risks involved the more you climb up the yield scale. And so just in conclusion on the investment front, if you find investing fun, you're doing it wrong. It should be boring. It should be a set and forget mentality. There's a lot of other things in life that are a lot more interesting that you can focus on. Let's talk about planning and the plans that we want to make. This is one of my favorite little quotes from Alice in Wonderland, book I loved as a kid and I love now because its life lessons are seemingly endless. She's wandering around with the Cheshire Cat and she says, hey, to the cat, Alice says, would you please tell me which way I should go from here? The cat says, well, that depends on where you want to go. She says, well, I don't really care where. And he says, or the cat says back, then it doesn't much matter which way you go. And she interrupts and says, yes, so as long as I get somewhere. And the cat says, you're sure to do that only if you walk long enough. All right, so the idea here is that without a plan and without some sense of where we want to get in terms of our various financial goals, retirement again, always the big one, but there's lots of things that we want to accomplish. Without articulating what that destination looks like and putting together a plan that gets us there, the chance of success is so much lower. There's a survey that comes out every year from a big investment house. They survey 7,000 wealthy individuals from all over the world, from Europe, Asia, North America, South America. And every year it has a number that stays roughly the same, which is that roughly 2/3 of these wealthy people don't have a financial plan, even those who work with a financial planner, meaning that they're just assembling stocks and bonds and other things but they really haven't targeted where they want that growth and income to get them. So again, if you don't have a plan, it's very hard to get somewhere. Couple quotes. Herm Edwards, who was an NFL coach, he's now a college coach. But I love this simple statement: a goal without a plan is a wish. We all have lots of wishes. We all have dreams. And that's great. That's a good thing. It's part of what makes us human. It's fun. But if we want to turn that wish into a goal, we need to have a plan. So a goal is not a plan, but I'll also say, and here I'm quoting a famous philosopher, Mike Tyson, who also used to be a boxing champ, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So just sitting down and saying, oh, okay, I want to save for retirement, I want to have a new home, I want to help out my parents, or I want to help out my kids, all totally valid, legitimate goals. But goals, and then you build a plan to achieve them. But then life happens. We need no better example than what we're all going through right now, completely out of the blue, unexpected global pandemic. We've all just been punched in the face. And so even if we had that plan for college, for home, for retirement, for helping our folks or our kids, well, we all just got punched in the face. And so there's a certain mindset that for people who make better decisions about money, there's a certain mindset related to being willing to adapt, being willing to say that my plan is in pencil and not in pen, and I know that it's going to have to change over time. People who have financial advisors tend to have better financial outcomes, and with respect to financial advisors, which is the group that I tend to work with the most in terms of coaching, it's not because those advisors are good at stocks and bonds. They're really no better than anybody else. They're not better investors. What they do is they not only help you make a plan, they help you stick to it, and they help you adapt it over time because life changes, right? So this is on the left here, a number of websites you can use to find a good planner. I know NAR has some resources. I think at the end, Brittany's going to mention some places in the website where you might find some help as well. One thing I'll flag is that the very bottom URL, brokercheck.finra.org, and I kind of screen grabbed their entry box from their screen. When you're thinking about working with a financial advisor, this website is so cool and so easy to use and insightful. You just type in the person's name, where they're from, and it's going to let you know what their licenses are, whether they've had any troubles in the past in terms of not treating people well, or whether they have a totally clean record. So it's very useful. When you're thinking about a planner, what are the considerations? Well, the first question is, hey, what do you do? What can you do for me? Some are going to be more investment oriented. Some are going to be more planning oriented. Some will tilt more toward insurance. It really depends. There's more than 300,000 financial advisors in the United States. And so you have a very large variety. So understanding what their service offerings are, absolutely critical. Figure out what the nature of the engagement is. There are some advisors or planners who will do kind of just a one-time, hey, let me check up, give you sort of a tune-up or a checkup. Do you have a plan? Are you on track? And you might be able to pay just a flat fee for that. But then there are many advisors, let's say the vast majority of advisors, where it's ongoing advice, and there you get into the question of how people are compensated and figuring out whether someone's really trying to help you or whether they're just trying to sell you investment products or insurance products is critically important. So simple is not easy. I think we can see that. And to recap the second section before concluding over the next few minutes, there's a lot that we can do to improve our money lives. I mean, money's overwhelming. It's intimidating, especially now. But the crisis is an opportunity. We can make some short-term fixes, a budget, a balance sheet, building back up that emergency fund, really focusing on, well, what are our long-term plans and do I have a path to get there? And then finally, this is where we get into the big picture, it's an opportunity to think about what really matters in our lives, not only what we want to do, but who we want to be, because for better or worse, money is a window onto our identity. It sort of both reveals and amplifies who we are deep down. And in the strangest of ways, our lives have been put on pause over the last month or so, and we do have a lot of time to think and reflect. And so let's not squander the crisis. It is an opportunity to think through these big picture topics. Question I'll pose to you is, what's your benchmark? What's your goal? How do you know if you'll have succeeded or failed in what you want to achieve? Well, I'm just going to come out, and hopefully I'm not being too direct. The benchmark for your life is not the S&P 500. It's not the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It's not the stock market. A lot of people actually operate that way. You know, the market goes up, they're in a good mood. The market goes down, they're in a bad mood. It might not have any impact on whether they can afford to eat out, go on that trip, support their parents or kids or anything else. But for whatever reason, their value and identity is tied to the market going up and down. And hopefully not many of us are in that. And if you are, I would advise trying to stop. I will say that for all of us, including me, some of the time, we want to achieve more, and not just more money in the sense of a bigger bank account or a bigger portfolio, but we want professional achievement. We want fame. We want beauty. We want athletic accomplishments. We want to keep winning, and American society is very geared toward that. Not a bad thing, being aspirational and wanting to achieve, but it does invite some problems. And I'm going to jump into those in a second, and then we'll wrap up with this notion of funded contentment. So the ability to underwrite a life that's meaningful to you. It's not only what you want to do, but it's who you want to be. I want to say a few words about this quest for more. There's something in the social psychology literature known as hedonic adaptation. And apologies for such a big, clumsy term. What it basically means is that no matter what our goals are in life, even when we achieve them, we want more. So, hey, I want to have a good dinner. Hey, I want my kids to get into the university of their choice. Hey, I want my parents to be comfortable in retirement. I myself want to be comfortable and have a dignified retirement. So everything from a good sandwich for lunch to a healthy retirement, these are all goals. The way we're wired, and it goes back to our slide referencing to 130,000 years ago, back in the savannah, during very different times. Those of us who are around now genetically, we're not very lazy. We achieve something, but then we have that built-in sense that I want more. Mad Men, one of my favorite shows. I bet you a lot of you like the show as well. From one of the episodes, Don Draper, the wonderful anti-hero of that great show, he says happiness is what you get right before you want more happiness. Let me give you a couple specific examples. There was a study done not that long ago that looked at the happiness of people who came into great wealth and those who were in terrible auto accidents. And so I have some of you might recognize the famous scientist Stephen Hawking, who had a neuromuscular disease at a young age and became a paraplegic by the time he was 21. What the researchers have found is that if you look at people who had some great windfall versus those who had some great tragedy, people were about as happy as they were a year out as they were right before the windfall or the tragedy. We all have set types. So some of us are naturally cheerful and happy. Some of us are more dour. And that's kind of who we are, not the topic for today. We all have our own personalities. We tend to reset to our natural type. So winning the lottery isn't the answer, and being in a terrible accident also isn't sort of the end of the story. It's hedonic adaptation. We adapt our happiness to whatever we have to deal with. And as Hawking said, my expectations were reduced to 0 when I was 21. Everything since then has been a bonus. And so how we manage expectations, hugely important. So true in the world of money. And I really want to distinguish between being rich and being wealthy. To me, being rich is the quest for more. It's the accumulation for more. And just to go back, I'll show you our our treadmill, no matter how fast you sprint on a treadmill, no matter how much you quest for more, you're not going to get further ahead. This has been studied extensively, but we also know it intuitively that this is the way our life goes. This is different than being wealthy, and that's the ability to underwrite a life that's meaningful to you. So what does that even mean, a life that's meaningful to you? Well, first of all, how do we get there? Wealth, truly defined, is only achievable in the context of a life where purpose and practice are thoughtfully calibrated. We went through a lot of practice a few slides ago in terms of saving and spending and budgeting and balance sheets and investing and portfolios and all that stuff. Okay, that's that. And we tend to think of our financial lives as connected to sort of quote unquote successful decision making in each of those realms. But if we're trying to achieve true financial wellness, a deeper sense of financial wellness, well, our money lives need to be connected to what our values are in the much broader sense. And so when purpose and practice can be calibrated, we're in a spot to become truly wealthy. What are the foundations of a meaningful life? Well, I'm going to be speaking for another 3 or 4 minutes, so I can't boil this ocean much, but I think intuitively we all know that there are some things that are deeply valuable and that create a greater sense of meaning. First and foremost, our sense of connection to others, which obviously during these difficult times has been strained. We're unable, for the most part, to get out and be with friends and colleagues and others. The enjoyment and meaning that we get from our social connections is non-negotiable. It's not a nice to have. It's genetically wired in us. We are all parts of a pack, and it's important to be in that pack. By the same token, having control over your life, having some sense of autonomy, also deeply meaningful. So not just the ability to do what you want whenever you want, but also at a level of story or narrative, you want to have a story that you feel that you fit into properly and that you can tell. You can tell the story that you want about yourself. Third is competence. So this is work. This is identity. This is, you go to a party, you meet somebody, and they ask you, well, what do you do? I hate to tell you, they don't care what you do. What they care about is who you are. They want to know, they want to have some window into your identity. And we all know on this call how important our vocation and our job and even our hobbies are in terms of defining that. And so these are difficult times, among many other reasons, because we're being dislocated from our work. And then finally, context, the sense that we are connected to something much bigger than ourselves. So if you look at theology and religion and faith, but also philosophy and sociology and anthropology, that connection to something bigger is really important. Religion and faith is, I think, obviously the number one source of that context, but also our attachment to place, whether it be your country or your neighborhood or your city, but even your sports teams. I mean, it might sound trivial, but it's true. That attachment to, hey, that's my favorite football team, baseball team, and that you're part of, fill in the blank nation. That is meaningful to us. The hard part here is connecting those deeper sources of meaning with a well-run financial life. And so we come back to our basic framework. And again, simple to state. We want to define our purpose, and then we want to set some priorities, in other words, make a plan. And then we've got 7 dimensions along which we make decisions: the earning, saving, spending, insuring, giving, and so forth. And this goes around and around. The shape for defining purpose is a circle, because we're never quite done figuring it out. There's a great line from social psychology that human beings believe that their personality is fixed, when in fact we're all just works in progress. So simple to state, but hopefully convinced you a little bit today that it is doable, but it takes some effort, and it takes takes the right attitude. So in review, your brain is wired to make lousy financial decisions. It doesn't mean any of us is irrational, let alone stupid or dumb. It's really hard to navigate money life. It just is what it is. That said, during normal times, but even during crisis times, lots of things you can do today and tomorrow and next year to fix what's broken and to improve what's not. And we are in a crisis. This is not a good situation, especially because it's fundamentally not a markets thing or a financial thing. It's a health thing. And that's really scary. And some of us hopefully will take this as an opportunity to think about what really matters in our life. So thank you very much. I think I've left a few minutes for Q&A. I don't know if Brittany or somebody else is going to jump on. And I also have some of my information up here. And folks shouldn't hesitate to go to my site or follow me on Twitter or even shoot me a note if you'd like. I can't give financial advice, but I can certainly point out resources to anyone that knows them, and I know for a fact that NAR has put together, because I know Mark well, Mark Gould, I know you guys have put together an unbelievable program.
Awesome. Brian, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
So now at this time, we do have some questions in our queue. Earlier in your presentation, you were talking about the long-term goals versus the here and now. And so when you're under stress, what kind of mental tips or tricks do you use to help you really focus on those long-term goals?
Yeah, I'd point out two things. And the first one has nothing to do with finance. It has to do with our bodies. And there's very much, and this is scientific reality, there's a mind-body connection. And so I'm sure we've all heard a million times over the last month or 6 weeks, get out, exercise, take walks, stretch your body, do push-ups, try to eat as healthy as possible. I don't always do a great job at that, but we're generally better able to make good decisions when our body feels a little bit better. That will, in fact, create some extra space and time for you to make better decisions. The second thing is the plan. Even if the plan isn't 100% right, even if the plan isn't 80% right, just having something on a piece of paper that says, here's the things I want to do and some sense of how you want to get there, at minimum, you can say, well, this plan isn't right. And, well, you have the opportunity to redo it to the extent that it's probably going to be in the ballpark. Everybody on the call probably still wants to retire at a reasonable age. Everybody wants to be helpful to family members and so on and so forth. Having that plan allows us to create time. Because as you allude to, and I mentioned a long time ago, during times of crisis, time compresses. Having a plan allows us to expand the time and create space to do better.
Good point. No, that's excellent. That's a really good point. And I just want to add in here for our members who are listening in, it's still not too late to submit a question. Simply send a message in the chat or email us at financialwellness@nar.realtor. And for those of you who are requesting the presentation and when the recording will be available, you will have it for review on Thursday, April 23rd. Visit nar.realtor/CFFW/webinars. Brian, I have another question. So, considering most people are staying at home and, they've learned to live without, those frivolous items, how do they maintain this focus once they get, back to normal in terms of a daily routine that we have used to before this pandemic happened?
Yeah, that not only is it a good question, it's something my wife and I talk about nearly every day because it's hard to spend money even if you want to. At least here in Chicago, nothing's really open, and other than ordering in food, there's nowhere to go. I mean, so I'll give you the dry part first, which is that, what a great time to just list all of the junk that we buy, the double, triple latte from Starbucks and all the tchotchkes and everything and say, it's clear I can live without this stuff. Maybe I should, maybe I can, and I don't want to create confusion. I don't want to contradict myself, but, life isn't about, just saving so that at some distant point in a vague future, you can retire well. I mean, life is about enjoyment. This notion of funded contentment that I believe in so deeply. There's a certain presence to it. Purpose is a concept in the present. Goals are a concept in the future. So giving yourself permission, and maybe the way I'll put it is being intentional. Being intentional is really cool. Being intentional is empowering because it means that we're saying to ourselves, this is something I'm going to give to myself because I've earned it, I deserve it, this is part of living well. And restricting yourself, showing discipline, also empowering because it says I can draw boundaries. It's kind of a cool exercise to see how intentional we can be coming out of this to say, I love that coffee that I have every day with all the jazz in it, So like, I'm still going to do that, but here's something else that I'm not going to do.
So it's a balance, yes. I like that. So kind of more on the investment side of things. So if someone wanted to dabble in the speculative investment market, is there a recommendation on sites for, to get started in this, whether if it's E-Trade, Charles Schwab? I know you're not going to endorse any, but, could you provide a list of maybe that you think would be great starting points?
Yeah. Wow, Brittany, you're setting me up with that one.
Oh, sorry.
No, I mean, I'm not going to advocate that people speculate. There are obviously brokerages, online brokerages out there. Charles Schwab was mentioned. TD Ameritrade is another. E-Trade is another, I think. But if someone wants to gamble right now on stocks and bonds because they don't want to, play online poker, or they can't go to the casino or whatever, that's totally fine. And there are online brokers that allow you to do that. So rather than giving people sort of direction on how to do that, let me just offer, advice on guardrails, which is that like, if you want to do that, that's fine. But how much, write down a number in pen, not pencil, that you're willing to lose, and show that to others as well that will keep you honest, and don't lose more than that. So if you can only afford to lose $1,000 or $500, write it down, put it in pen, put it in an envelope, show your husband or wife, your parents, your kids, whoever, your colleague, your best friend, and stick to it. These things tend to get out of control. And, it's a very timely and specific example. But yesterday, the price of oil fell 305%. It makes no sense. I mean, I could explain it, but there's no point in it. It's one of the craziest things that's ever happened in financial markets. And there are lots of people who were in supposedly diversified energy funds that just lost all of their money yesterday when they thought they were making a broad-based bet on global oil markets. They just got killed. So really, please, folks, be careful.
Good point. No, thank you for that. We have a couple more questions, and I'll try to run through these quickly. So what tools do you recommend, just to really help getting your spending under control? Is there anything in particular that could help as a good starting point?
Yeah. I mean, I'm old school. I'm always an advocate of a pad of paper and a pen, but I also love software. I sort of advocate for bionic solutions, meaning that, like, as humans, we know what we're doing, and we want to be in control, but having some technology to help us out is awesome and sometimes pretty cool. There's a few different sites. Quicken does a good job. I think they own or partnered with Mint.com, MINT.com. And let me just be super crystal clear. I'm not advocating for these sites. Whatever liability issues could come around, I am not advocating anyone use any of these sites. I just have used them and personally have had totally fine experiences. There's another one called literally You Need a Budget. So if you just type in youneedabudget.com or ynab.com, it's pretty slick. Googling online budget tools or online balance sheet is going to give you a host of really slick and easy to use solutions, because there's a lot of, a balance sheet is assets on one side, liabilities on the other, what you own versus what you owe. There's nothing innovative in what a balance sheet is. but there are some online widgets and templates that you can use to help you in that process.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. And I think at this time we just have one more question. So for somebody who wants to, start paying off credit cards and, then finally apply some of those funds towards a retirement, what's the best strategy or approach to try and get those down? Do the ones that have a few or the ones that's completely maxed out? What do you recommend?
When it comes to debt, the question is, what's my rate of interest? So we're not wired from a brain science point of view to think in compounding, let alone exponential terms. So what happens to many of us is that you have an interest rate that doesn't sound that high, and next thing you know, you look a few months later and your balance is enormous. So critically important to, again, pad of paper and a pen or a simple Excel sheet or a Google sheet, make a full comprehensive, very clear list of all of your sources of debt, list what the rate of interest is, list the term of the debt, and to the extent possible, you want to retire the most expensive debt first, and to do what you can. I'm in no position to recommend debt consolidators or anything like that, but again, this is a golden age of personal finance. There's a lot of tools out there. Googling, sort of debt consolidation or tools to manage debt can get you into a marginally better spot.
Good point. Okay, I think that was a helpful tip. Thank you, Brian. So for members, if you have any questions that were not answered during the Q&A, please email it to financialwellness@nar.realtor. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but Brian, if you could leave us with one more key point or a closing statement, what would that last statement be, please?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the quote that I sort of bungled before that's been so meaningful to me in my life, both at the level of managing money, but also in terms of having, a good marriage and being a good dad and things like that. And it comes from a social psychologist named Daniel Gilbert, and he wrote that human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think that they're finished. I'll say it again. Human beings are works in progress that mistakenly think they're finished. I think it's such a wonderful and powerful insight to know that at any moment in time, even when things feel lousy, we're on our way moving forward, and we have some control. We have some power to be the author of our story. Money is an unavoidable part of that story. Hopefully some of the tips and perspectives today on money life, all the different dimensions, gives you a more granular sense of what you can hold on to, what you can control. But keep in mind that we're all struggling to write the next version of ourselves, and we're all in this together.
Very true. Thank you so much, Brian. We really appreciate you sharing this wonderful presentation with us today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Brittany, it was great. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I wish everyone health and happiness.
Thank you so much. So members, if you're looking for a great starting point, such as like a financial plan, you can take a quick 10-question financial assessment from the Center for Realtor Financial Wellness, and if you take this assessment, you will have personalized and trackable goals. So this center is a great resource, and as being an NAR member, this is an additional benefit that you have with your membership. So note, this is an educational resource, and it's not intended to take the place of consulting a financial professional. So even better, the platform does not store, share, or sell any information. Simply visit financialwellness.realtor to get started. If you have any questions, you can also email the NAR team at financialwellness@nar.realtor. And one last thing that I do want to share, please note that you can also find additional resources provided to you by NAR's Right Tools Right Now resource. This relaunch program includes reduced or no-cost tools to support you through this COVID-19 pandemic. So the site includes webinars, educational resources, and a timely market report for your business. Please visit nar.realtor/write tools right now. So I just want to say to everyone, thank you so much for your time. This does conclude our webinar. And special thanks, members, for joining the call. If you've missed any part of this webinar session, we will be posting the recorded webinar and PowerPoint under nar.realtor/CFFW/webinars. I repeat, the recording will be available on Thursday, April 23rd at nar.realtor/CFFW/webinars. And so at the end of this session, a survey bar is going to pop up on your desktop browser. Please leave us your feedback on today's presentation. Thank you so much. We look forward to having you join us for our next Financial Source webinar session on June 17th at 1 p.m. Central. Take care, be safe, and thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Brian. We appreciate it. Have a good one, everyone.